High Side, Low Side, Season 2, Episode 5 is now the best time to buy a used bike. Scene 2, ABC, Take 1.
Very gentle sticks. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said any funny comments.
Wait, those aren't sticks. I thought the sticks
Wasn't a funny comment either.
Yeah,
Wow.
you're right.
Spurge coming in hot. Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla coming at you with another High Side, Low Side, joined by my compadres. We got Marquis Spurge, Technology-ful Joe, of course.
We never forget those nicknames.
No, you got it. What good is a joke if you can't keep coming back to it? You got to revisit them. That's what
Just
makes
beat
it
it
funny.
like it's a dead horse.
So, as is our standard, we're gonna hash out one of the big issues in motorcycling. Now, I think I can safely speak for you guys here. I'm a huge fan of used motorcycles. I think you guys are as well.
Owned a few.
So we're talking used bikes today, and we're going to talk about if a used bike maybe makes more sense than a new one. But specifically, we're talking for this upcoming season here for 2020, is a used bike the way to fly?
But before we dive in, just keep in mind we do have the podcast component of this where we dive in a little bit deeper. We've got some interviews with notable figures in the motorcycle community, and we also answer questions and comments from viewers like you. So make sure you check it out. Just type in RevZilla to wherever you get your podcast.
Why, Spurge, why do you always show them how to type?
You know, I think the problem is I type. That's how I dazzle them with my typing hands. But really, I guess it's more like
I was going to say, does anybody
most
even
people.
use a computer
Like I guess most
anymore?
people are like typing it with
nobody
their
does
thumbs.
that.
Now that they know how to do that.
All right, so let's get right into things. My first question is, so, you know, when we kind of look at our surroundings, right? Baby boomers are hanging it up. A lot of them are hanging it up for good. Do you guys see this having an effect on the motorcycle market right now?
So I actually don't necessarily see baby boomers hanging it up for good completely just yet. What I do see and what I have
There's a
seen that
shift.
surprised me is a shift where they're actually purchasing smaller displacement motorcycles. One of the things that really surprised me when I did the Versys 300 review was I assumed that was going to be an entry-level bike for a lot of people looking at getting into adventure riding or adventure touring.
Sure.
The response that we got in the comments for that article was actually that there were a lot of people that were 70 plus years old that were selling their larger, more expensive bikes and moving down to something that was lighter, that was smaller, that they felt more comfortable riding. So while, yes, I do agree with your question that the baby boomers will eventually be phased out, what I think we're seeing right now is that there is this shift. And the market, the effect that it's having on the market is that the money that's being spent now is on much more affordable, lower displacement motorcycles, and they're no longer out there spending the money that they do have, and they're arguably the group of riders that have the most money to spend. They're no longer buying the big $20,000, $30,000 large, heavy displacement motorcycles, whether that's a BMW, GS, or whether that's the Harley. So I do think there is a shift in the motorcycles that they're actually purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cool thing about that is that now that there's so many good small displacement new bikes available, they're kind of getting scooped up by all the new riders and also some older experienced riders. Like we've seen some of our comments come through already that are talking about how, like you said, people are kind of outgrowing the big bikes, which was pretty interesting, So I think that where you're coming from is maybe the fact that you and I might look at some Harleys more often than not, and that there are unbelievably cheap big touring bikes for sale with super low miles that are really well taken care of. So there's a lot of really good bigger bikes getting
and
put
not
up.
just Harleys, but again, I think you're seeing it across the board where you have these
Touring bikes and
larger
stuff.
displacement touring bikes and adventure bikes with relatively low miles.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting around. I mean, you can get a pretty good deal on one.
So I would like to sort of, I guess, qualify because I guess maybe I hinted at my own position in the question, but I would like to qualify that. I mean, remember, so when we talk about a generation is typically defined as like roughly a 20-year period. So.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not to your point. Not all the baby boomers are going out and they're like, oh, I'm all done.
I'm done.
I think the older ones are already done or finishing. There's still some younger ones, obviously, still in the game. And to your point too, I agree that there are some, there have been some inroads made, I think, on the smaller bikes. When you were saying that, I was kind of laughing in my head because I was thinking about the Honda Monkey. It's
Just picture you laughing in your head versus laughing.
Well,
out
I didn't
loud.
laugh out of my head because I didn't want to interrupt you. I was thinking of the Honda Monkey, which is kind of humorous to me. Like, I don't think anybody, I think it's like I think it's actually state law in like 37 or 38 states that if you're under the age of 55, you're not allowed to purchase a Honda Monkey. I mean, and those things are a little more expensive than the Grom. I mean, like, I'm not saying it's not justified, but it seemed like Honda knew their market on that one. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention too is kind of what you guys were saying as well, was that, you know, some of these larger bikes are definitely up for sale. The smaller stuff, I think, is getting snapped up because younger riders tend to not gravitate towards this stuff. But there's also like there's like a style sort of element here too. So to your point, I think some of the bigger cruisers are not going to be very popular. I was on Craigslist the other day. I saw this beautiful Shadow Ace. Asking price $1,500. I was like,
dude, I found a few
so
that are
much
like
motorcycle
so cheap.
for that
Define
kind of money.
beautiful.
Beautiful
good-looking
condition,
bike.
you know, like
Yeah.
it's just not
Beautiful condition.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bike that I think anybody would be proud to go own. But
We've established on the cruiser episode that you are not a fan.
No, well, like, let's just be honest. I mean, a Honda Shadow isn't exactly, you know, beautiful.
Send your hate mail.
My point, though, is there's not only an economic component here, I think, too, but also a style one, to your point. That Versus 300, that'd be a pretty hot seller. I don't think you'd take a bath on one of those if you were trying to sell one now, whereas if you're selling a Honda Shadow Ace, you're gonna take a little bit.
I do like, what was the one, the RS? The Honda Shadow RS I liked. I thought that was a pretty cool one.
Oh,
Just throwing that out
thought
there.
the Phantom was attractive while we're talking about
Yes.
The all
shadows.
blacked out one?
Yeah,
that was cool.
All right, so let's get that out of there because now we're just rambling about motorcycles.
Mostly Honda Shadows.
That's pretty much our every show
Yeah.
the entire time.
Now we're going to bring some more generational stuff into this, I think. You know, it's funny. Everybody uses the term millennial.
I was hoping we were going to throw the millennials
bear
out
with
there.
me. I think
get a bunch of angry baby boomers being like, the kids today don't know shit.
I think a lot of people say millennial when they might actually mean something more to the effect of yuppie. But the reason I'm bringing, which is not exactly the same thing. But my question here is, you know, are some of these shifts we're seeing in the used bike pricing, is the used bike market being pushed around by the new bike market? Are new motorcycle prices affecting the price of these used bikes we're seeing that you guys?
Yeah, of course. You know, with all the technology, like we got into it on our technology episode. You know, and now it's like every electronic device that we all carry. You know, every year there's a new whiz bang thing that everyone has to have. So if you're the type of person that's really obsessed with that sort of stuff, you know, on the modern bikes, then you're willing to pay that extra scratch every year to have the new IMU and link braking. And if you don't really care, you know, like I'll wait and buy an older version of a phone, you know, because it's a few $100 cheaper. Like, who cares? You know, it's all going to be old in a year or two anyway. So, you know, if I could save a few grand up front and buy either a leftover bike or a bike that had been traded in by somebody who really took care of it, or maybe that bike was serviced by the dealer the whole time from when it was brand new to when it was available on the showroom floor, and then it's for sale, you know, like, cool, you know, you have all your service records, it's been, you know, detailed and well maintained. That's how I ended up getting my Tiger.
Yep. I'll just come right out and say it. New motorcycles are friggin' expensive, man. Like,
yeah.
I was going to say the opposite.
When did a 1,000cc race rep cost 18, 19, 20 grand?
But so you could look at it that way, but then also look at all the inexpensive motorcycles that are out there. Look at everything from a FZ07 to a Z650 to a XSR 900. I mean, there's a lot of bikes out there that are a Z900.
And I'm the first person to say the bikes have gotten objectively, measurably better, and I'm also the first person to say, too, that if you look at it, you know, in terms of inflation, the bikes now are actually a little bit cheaper with the same price as they once were. That having been said, when you look at the rising cost of a lot of other things, I think it's still, you know, it hasn't shrunk. You know, people are spending more on everything else too, food and housing and
sure, but
loans,
like
blah, blah,
unless
blah,
somebody who's like, man, I have to have a brand new GS 1250 for $22,000, the average person that just wants to go out and buy a brand new motorcycle can get a lot of bike for their money. And I think that the effect that has had on the used market is now the used bikes are even cheaper. Some of the Japanese manufacturers have actually done themselves a disservice with some of the pricing that they have on their new models, because it's really knocked the used market down so much that if you're just starting out and you're looking at let's look at like an MT-07, if you're looking at like a first gen FZ07 before they changed the naming convention to match the rest of the world, and you can pick one of those up for like $4,000, are you going to go out and spend $7,000 on a brand new one? There are some of these.
I feel like we're on the same page. We're saying the same thing. Yeah, that new bike is expensive relative to this really nice used one.
So I guess that's the point. It's relative. But I guess what I was saying is that I don't think that those middle tier bikes. I don't think it's that they're so expensive that they're not affordable. I think it's that bikes have become so reliable, and now you can get the used ones for even cheaper.
Well, so, and I mentioned that I wanted to keep this very now specific, right? So if people stumble upon this video in 2 years, I want them.
It's really about 2020.
Right. So I think there's like a confluence of factors that are sort of affecting things. So I do think that, to your point, there are really, the motorcycles have been great for a long time. There's some really good, really reliable stuff out there in the market. I do think that, especially if you're willing to ride a bike that's not stylish, like we talked about before, there's some deals to be had. But one of the other things I think is also very important too is that we're also at this weird kind of technological crossroads at the moment. So we're probably coming to the end of time, I think, in this country, maybe all countries, where you can pick up a motorcycle without ABS. We're coming to the end of time when you can pick up a motorcycle with a carburetor on it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is a problem or that, we got to bring back the carburetors or save the drum brakes or whatever. Like, whatever. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is those things do actually make the motorcycles a little bit more expensive. So I think also, too, that fact that, some of the laws of other countries are now sort of affecting the bikes that are for sale here. I think that's also contributing to sort of that sort of stark difference between your used bike and your new bike. To your point you made earlier when you're looking at the 2-year-old model, well, does the 2-year-old model have ABS on? I think that's a question a lot of people ask.
So I think there's a lot of people that ask that question more than I realize. Because if I'm looking at a used bike, I'm not really worried if it has ABS or not. I'm just
not
worried
either,
about the deal.
But
there's a lot of people
be.
that are. There's a lot. We've seen so many comments where people are like, "I wouldn't buy a bike if it doesn't have ABS."
Yeah.
And I do think that if you start getting to like 5 years ago, then you'd probably have a little bit more of that debate. I think anything in the past year or two, for some recent leftovers, they all have ABS.
Depends how used.
So I guess that's a question too. Is like how used is too used?
Sure.
Like, are we looking at a bike that's 10 years old? Probably not going to be the same discussion that we're having right now. Where like buying a bike that's 2 or 3 years old is probably a pretty smoking deal.
I got to be honest though, a 10-year-old bike at this point, I don't know about you guys. I don't know if this is just because I'm getting old and I'm stuck in time, or if because this actually makes mechanical sense. I see a 10-year-old bike and I'm not like, old bike. I'm like, 10-year-old bike.
Yeah.
I would totally scoop.
Do you have any questions in there about extraordinarily used bikes?
Super used bikes.
Because I mean, my point where I'm coming from is that my bikes that I have that are really old, like 70s and earlier.
Oh, that's modern motorcycle. Get out of here.
Well, those bikes I've always made money on. You know what I mean? I bought them cheap. I fixed them up. I rode them for a few years.
There comes a point where they're just every bike's worth $800.
Well, I think that if you're looking at a bike that's 3, 4, maybe even up to 10 years old, you're still probably going to end up losing money on it, after you have it for a bit. So if you go even farther back and start buying bikes that could be potentially collectible, like now we're starting to see a lot of bikes from the 80s be collector's items, that are worth double what they MSRP'd for back in the day, So,
but a lot of that's due to inflation. But I was just going to point out, look at this guy. Oh, I might make money on a bike. I might lose money on a bike. I am guaranteed to lose money on any motorcycle I own. I can do anything on a bike but make money on one.
I think there's a difference between like you buying something and fixing it up and then selling it for more money, because you've got the mechanical talent. You're not charging yourself for labor. We talked about that the other day too. Like you're not accounting for the amount of man hours or Joe hours that you put into a project.
Why are Joe hours not man hours?
It's a step above. He's like a superhuman man.
I'm about to cancel you.
But no, I think that Joe said something about the 10-year-old thing, right? I think that if you were to buy a 10-year-old bike, I think 10 years is kind of like I can buy this bike for a set amount of money. As long as I don't thrash the hell out of it, I could probably sell it for about the same amount of money. Like when I bought my VFR, I bought it for about $2,500 and I sold it for about $2,800. So I made a little bit of money, but I also put a reg rec on it and new bearings and all that stuff.
I don't think that's always true. Look at the guy with my Shadow Ace. I'm sure he didn't buy that for $1,500.
Maybe if he bought it a year ago, he did. That's what I'm saying. Is like it depends on how long he bought it.
That's
true. If I were to buy a 10-year-old bike today and sell it 2 years from now, it's probably worth about the same. Whereas if I were to buy a 2-year-old bike today and sell it 2 years from now, it's probably going to take a little bit more of a hit.
Bath. Yeah, well, that's
well, if that guy hangs on to his Shadow Ace for another 30 years and it's pristine and he tries to sell it at that point, it may be collectible.
Do we get into the questions yet where like the fact that all of this is the reason that new bikes aren't selling and then all of a sudden those prices start coming down?
Well, yeah, that's literally the next question.
I'm jumping ahead to the conclusion. I'm so excited.
You're just so predictable. That's what it is.
Well, now that you've both jumped the gun, I feel like it's time to move on to question number 3. Is the motorcycle industry's previous sales success now a detriment?
Ooh.
So I mean, you guys have
That goes back to what I was saying with the
plowed head on
FZ07,
into
right? I think when Yamaha introduced the FZ07, the FZ09, which is now the MT07, the MT09, I think they priced them so competitively that they sold a ton. I mean, those were the bikes to have for like a good year and a half, 2-year period. But now, all that those first rounds of bikes that were sold are all available for, significant discounts as used bikes. They probably haven't been thrashed too hard. So now you look at someone like Yamaha, and then they're having trouble selling their new models. So I think that is a problem. I think the other thing that's a problem too is that we've come to this rebate culture where there's a lot of people that are like, well, the bike came out in March, and unless I absolutely have to have the bike right now, I'll just wait until September. And there's probably going to be, a $500 rebate on it or a $750 rebate on it.
Yeah.
So I'll just wait and I'll buy it when I know I can get a discount. I think that hurts, sales as well.
I think part of it too is, again, the reliability of bikes and how awesome they are to use now and ride, So it's like you're finding a lot of folks now, something to consider really is that buyers are well more educated than they've ever been before. That's why you go into these dealerships and the salesmen don't know anything about the bikes, because everyone who comes in there has their thing that they printed out or it's on their phone that has every spec about the bike. So,
they're an expert, right? If they come in and they're like, I want to buy this bike, they've probably already watched 7 reviews. They've read everything about it. Yeah.
So now you're getting, with all these consumers being so educated, they're buying these bikes that they know they're going to love. So they may end up hanging on to these bikes for a really long time. Like I've had my Tiger a long time. I don't have any plans on getting rid of it.
So you're saying you think a lot of the bikes on the used market then are from people who just bought the wrong thing and were like, oh, I gotta
yeah, and I think that's not really that common anymore. I think, way back before.
You know what would solve this problem, right? Test rides.
Right. Well, that's the other thing.
Episode right there.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. We do see a lot more manufacturers offering, demo days and things like that. So now you have a combination of a super educated consumer, someone who may have been able to take a test ride on it. So they're getting a bike that they're probably going to love and hang on to for a long time, especially since they're so reliable.
But is that right now specific? I feel like that's been happening for 10, 15 years.
I don't think it's even
the internet. I mean, we didn't come out of the internet in 2019.
I don't think it's also buying the wrong bike. I think it's probably people that buy a bike, try it for a couple of years, move on to something else, buy a bike, try it for a couple of years, move on to something else.
And also what people want changes over time. You know what I mean? Like I don't really have any interest in owning a naked sport bike anymore. There's a lot of folks out there that do.
So to me, that doesn't. I don't know that is 100% that we really kind of hit on the core of the question, which is were previous sales a detriment? I think they were. So the bikes are more reliable for sure. That's like there are more bikes hanging around.
Yeah.
The manufacturers sold to the people who had money, and a lot of those people had money but didn't have time to go ride their motorcycles because that's in America we work a lot now, and there's people spend more and more time working and doing other things, so there's fewer and fewer hours in the day to go ride your bike. I also think too, I'm thinking specifically of Harley Davidson right now. Boy, some of what they sowed, they're certainly reaping right now. They spent a long time catering to just this very narrow demographic, and now they're very quickly having to dig themselves out of that hole. And I think that's not good. So, you keep hearing about Harley's core customer, et cetera. They can't turn their back on that person, but they still need to very quickly wheel the ship around and start catering to sort of the next, wave of riders coming in. I thought it was very poignant. You guys saw recently last year when they released the two new bikes. We saw the decked out CVO Tri-Glide, and then there was the hot rod Softail bike. Like that was talk about both ends of the spectrum of people.
For folks that don't know what a Tri-Glide is a trike.
Trike. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So,
very expensive.
But I mean, but very clear they were aiming really at the two extreme ends of the market. They're currently serving and probably trying to even spread that scatter shot out a little farther. But
honestly, I think that is because Harley's always been concerned with selling the lifestyle and not just
Not
selling
always.
the machine.
Always maybe in your
and letting people do what they want with the machine.
Always maybe in your lifetime, but I don't think they've always
Right,
done
obviously.
that.
But I think that, that's what happens because, like society shifts, trends shift, it's hard for that sort of company, that sort of approach to it to stay ahead of it.
Sure, but step back. Let's go back to pick a CEO, like Wandell or whoever from years gone by. What else are you going to do? I mean, you could make the argument. At some point, I think they had 65% of the American heavy bike market. There's nowhere to go but down from there.
Right.
I mean, what are you supposed to do? Like, you're supposed to not sell stuff just so your sales don't slip? Like,
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
that
well,
doesn't make
I
sense.
think of the whole thing with Buell. Like I grew up seeing Buells enter Harley dealerships and be completely ignored by the salesman,
Yeah.
and have people come in interested in a Buell, and then they try to sell them a Sportster or something like that, and then you have a consumer who's confused because they don't really want a cruiser style bike; they want something a little bit unique.
Oh,
But they're being
confused and
told
get
they're
just
wrong.
pissed
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's confusing.
So before you move on from that question, I do want to go back because the original question was: our current sales are the fact that the sales were so good? Is that what's
I think
hurting?
they cannibalized. I think there were past sales that cannibalized
So again,
present stuff.
the only thing I want to revisit is just like the comment that I made earlier about the rebates, right? Because when you look at the fact that there's many OEMs that are guilty of this, but I'm thinking recently on KTM when I bought my 1090. I bought my 1090, and then 3 months later they put out $2,000 rebates. So now all of a sudden that bike is $2,000 cheaper. So what did that do for my resale value of my
So
bike? It just undercut the resale value of my bike by $2,000
You touched
too.
on this earlier, and I was going to jump in, and I was like, no, I'm going to try and stay on topic. But now it's come up twice, so I'm going to say something. You know who's guiltier of this than anybody else on the planet is Honda. I'm putting you on blast, Honda. You want to talk about ridiculous rebates. Look at something like a Honda Interceptor, VFR. Good Lord, the discounts they put on those things just to move them is ridiculous. And to your point, who does it take a bite out of? Somebody selling the used one, because you got to crash your price super low.
Well, the person selling the used one was probably the person that was like the one that went into the showroom
paid full pop
and
for
paid
it,
full
or
pop
very
for it.
close. Yeah,
So it's like that's where
that drives me up
I
a
get
wall.
I get that you got to move those end of year units and everything else, but if you would figure out an appropriate pricing from the get-go,
Right.
you could
Well,
probably keep it even. And this
now-
goes back to the conversation we had about Pop-Up's motorcycle shop and like how to sell these bikes right the first time.
And it does. It comes back to that user comment we had too, where we were talking about maybe customizing the bikes and making them to order. But you've just touched on one of the darkest secrets of this industry, which is channel stuffing. For those of you who are not familiar with channel stuffing,
Not the same as channel surfing.
right. So just so you know, the manufacturer doesn't make their money when you buy your motorcycle. Instead, they move that bike to the dealer, and the dealer either buys it for cash, a pretty rare occurrence, or the dealer has that bike on what they call plan. So it sits on the floor and they pay the monthly, sort of finance charge until that bike moves on. Well, there are minimum numbers of bikes that the manufacturers tell the dealer that they will have. You need this many square feet of floor space, and your display needs to look like this, and you need to buy this many of this, and if you want one of the hot bikes, you got to take one of these turd sellers too. It gets real ugly, and I think that also contributes to deeply discounted bikes, dealers doing whatever they can just to move the things.
And those deeply discounted bikes then lead to a
crashed used
discounted used bike
Mm-hmm.
price. So now I can buy a used bike for dirt cheap, and I'm not going to go and spend the money on a new bike until those rebates come out, and I can get $3,000 off of a new bike. Like
Right.
the system has got to change. Otherwise, we're going
Make 'em
to
to order,
keep
baby.
seeing declining sales because people are just going to keep holding out until they can keep getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper
Well,
items.
and before we move on to the other question is, I still firmly believe this. I think the baby boomers with this weird blip culturally in America where motorcycles made a bunch of sense. I just think that this this sort of like fringe activity took on this crazy popularity for a hot minute and then went right back to, if you remove the baby boomer bike sale years out of there.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I do think that there is potential. I think eventually what you're going to see in this country and maybe worldwide, but I think eventually in America what you're going to see is this backlash against this generation that's sitting looking at their phones the whole time. That's how they're going to live their life. I mean, you're starting to see it already. Like, I hate my phone.
Can you shake your fist? There we go.
But I think at some point there is going to be this backlash against sitting around on a computer
Yeah.
and sitting around on a phone. Like, I think people are
If
going
there's-
to want to go out
If there's
and
any
do
hope
something.
for motorcycles, that is it.
Yeah.
All right, before we waste this whole show just going horribly afield, that's my fault. What are the upsides to buying new this upcoming model year?
I think the number one reason to buy a new bike in 2020 or any year is going to be what new models are coming out. What am I excited about? What do I want to get first before anybody else?
Right.
The S1000RR for BMW last year was like a phenomenal seller because they made so many crazy changes and it was relatively inexpensive for the changes made.
Yeah.
You're going to see Ducati with the V4 Street Fighter. You're going to see all those models that people are excited about. And the other big thing that you're going to see is the dirt segment.
But hang on, back up 1 second. I'm going to call you out the same way I did him. That's not 2020 specific.
No,
I mean, because that could be said for any new model year.
So what you're saying is that would not be something specific to 2020, even though we're listing out 2020 models. What you're saying is what
I
would
think
be
that would
different?
be true of any new model year. And really, I'm just trying to provide a counterpoint. I think that, again, all three of us probably are big proponents of used. I think that's where most of our motorcycles have come from, is the used market. But it's funny, when I thought about this, one of the reasons I would not buy a new motorcycle right now is I don't have cash on hand to do it. I just don't. I want to put my money towards something else. But I would say, and part of that has to do with the economy. To me, is a little scary at the time we're filming this right now. It's as good probably as it's ever gonna get, and it looks like maybe there's some cracks showing. It's a little concerning. But I will say, for somebody who did have the intestinal fortitude to run out and grab themselves a new motorcycle, part of what's fueling that, all that cheap money, would be a great reason to buy a motorcycle.
So that's
if you want to take a loan out to buy a bike right now, like, it is a great time. Even if you have the cash in your pocket, you might be better off taking the loan and then taking your cash and going to invest it.
So that's actually, when you were reforming the question back to the 2020, that's immediately what I was thinking about, because I have 2 bikes right now that I bought new. There's 2 bikes that I'm making. I'm making payments on 2 bikes, and my interest rate is around, I think, 2%.
Yeah, that's
so
how it is for
I'm
mine.
actually saving money by taking out a bike loan and then taking the money, instead of just going out and spending 10 grand on a bike and saying, well, that's done. I make a payment for $150 a month, and I put the rest of it in savings or in stocks and investments. But that's the number one reason, is that the interest rates are so low right now that if you're looking at new versus used, a lot of times the interest rate on a used bike is about double what the interest rate is on a new bike. So if you're not planning on paying cash for it and you want to float the note, I think this is a great time to buy a new bike.
The savings on a used bike are almost washed out by the good interest rate you can get on a new bike loan.
Okay, so this is going to lead us to, I think, and I'm gonna get you guys talking about something too. This might not be 2020 specific. This might be one of those things that's reoccurring with the new bike in general. We do, but this is going to make a nice segue.
Man.
Think of the viewers.
Come on, they want to know what
time. We got to give them a nice smooth segue.
So you're saying that somebody's watching this in 2021?
No, I'm saying this might be. So the next question I'm going to ask you is probably true of new bikes, but there's also going to be some 2020 information here too. So, are your feelings on that about buying a new bike, is that universal from genre to genre? So it sounds like we had a pretty narrow view on hang on. It sounds like we had a pretty narrow view on, like, oh yeah, well, I guess if you're going to float the note, you should get a new bike, but otherwise used sounds pretty good. I'm pretty sure when I just asked you guys genre to genre, are you feeling the same? Both of you have looks on right now and said that maybe, wait, hang on, there's something else I want to talk about. Go.
I know a bunch of people that have bought used dirt bikes and really became sad.
So such a bad decision to buy a used dirt bike.
Yeah.
You don't know what problem. If somebody's selling a used dirt bike, they're selling it for a reason.
Not 2020 specific, but
just, and also think of anything that goes off road. This comes, it's dirt bikes or
time out. I got a great deal at some point for a 1090, and that's been off road. So don't.
It's never been upside down in a creek.
I cannot believe we have made it to question 5, and you guys keep dancing around this. Not one of you has. You've talked about new bikes. You've talked about your 1090. Can somebody please mention a new KTM dirt bike?
I just haven't said the word. I said my 350. And I said my 1090.
Okay,
I just didn't mention the fact that they were KTM models.
I mean, honestly, like for anyone out there who's thinking about getting into dirt bikes or adventure bikes, consider the fact that the previous owner probably had sunk the thing in a creek up to the handlebars at some point.
So again, time out. So I would agree with you with the dirt bikes. And the cool thing about dirt bikes are every 2 years they get a little bit better. Like I was just hanging out Solid the other day. And I was looking at the 2020 models. Right. But like the new KTM dirt bikes are like, like I was like, what do they keep changing? And I was talking to Kevin over at Solid Performance. He's like, well, the chassis is different, and like the wheel span is different. And they have got this new adjuster. I'm like, it's narrower. I'm like, that's insane. Like like the one that I have is so good. Like, how do they keep getting them better? But they do. So like, dirt bikes, absolutely. I would say with adventure bikes, I'm split 50-50. There are so many cool new adventure bikes coming out that like buying something new, you're getting the lightest, the ones that probably had the most technology in them,
most power.
The most technologyful.
Most
the suspension,
power for a
the
CC,
suspensions. Well, I don't even care about the power, but the suspensions have gotten so sophisticated. So that is a reason to buy new. But with the adventure market, you're talking about flip them over in a creek. I think there's a lot of people that go out, they buy an adventure bike, they throw $2,000 worth of protection on it, and they have this great ambition in their head that they're going to go ride it, and they don't. So the adventure segment, depending on what you're looking for, might not be the segment that I would argue buying new for.
Well, it's like, you look at how many super kitted out Forerunners are rolling around the road that have never ever seen dirt, but still a killer truck, you know. So, some folks are really thrashing these things for what they were designed to do, and some just like, the vibe, the look, all that kind of stuff.
But I do think that the adventure segment, much like the dirt segment, is one of the few segments where there are constantly new models coming out. So for 2020, or just in general, like looking at the adventure bikes, like there are some pretty cool upgrades and advancements, whether you're looking at BMW or you're looking at KTM or you're looking at Yamaha or you're looking at Honda. You're looking at a new Africa Twin, Tenere, 790. Like
he's gonna name every
BMW,
right? But you could. But what you're saying is not 2020 specific. I think you could say that at any point
I thought
in time.
we weren't talking about. We had a pass on that.
Yeah, we had a pass.
Part of this, you led the whole
That was
question.
the
This
disclaimer.
wasn't 2020 specific anymore.
Segue, not on the whole question. So I'm going to bring it back then, 2020 specific. So as far as my feelings on buying new for 2020. I would say, so kind of touching on what I had mentioned earlier, if you do want a bike with some old-timey tech, if you do want a 2-valve head, if you do want a bike with a carburetor, if you want something that has a drum brake on it, boys, pickings are getting kind of slim.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to jump down to your local motorcycle shop and see what they have, because there's not going to be a row of 6,000 TW200s parked out there for you to go buy. The other thing I would say, too, is 2020 specific relative to genre, for me, is going to be cruisers. This is year of the cruiser. You guys know, so I recently picked up a station wagon, this terrible old man station wagon.
Beautiful.
They're not
lovely.
popular. Now's a good time to pick up a wagon.
Right.
But you're talking about
nobody
used.
wants them. Yeah. But
it's a 2020 Ford Taurus station wagon.
But I agree that there are that I am talking used, but they're still making new cruisers, right? So if you go out and you are okay riding a cruiser, a bike that's not maybe in style right now, not some of these adventure bikes, some of these small displacement bikes you guys mentioned earlier, you can run out and get a ripping deal on some of these new, and it might be a new leftover, it might be a 2-3-year-old bike sitting there. But man, you can get some screaming deals on stuff right now.
But my question goes,
still get your new financing, by the way.
Yeah. So, but what you were talking about with like the technology, right? If you still want a bike with carburetor, if you still want a bike that has a drum brake, something like that. What you're saying is you're thinking that's going to eventually go away. So if you want a new one, it has to. No, I agree with you.
Right. If you want one that's not
if you want
has
a new one
and blah blah
and
blah,
you don't want all of the new technology, now 2020 might be the year to go out and buy.
I think this is going to be just like cars. We're never going to go back to like the real simple stuff, that was meant to be worked on by the monkey who was riding it. All right, so let's round this thing out. 2020 calendar year, new or used?
Used.
Do I have? I've already bought.
Unless
a lot
it's a
of,
dirt bike.
Am I committing to buying something in 2020?
I'm just what do you?
If I
was gonna buy something in 2020, I would probably buy something used. And actually, I think because I bought so many new bikes recently, I would probably go a little bit older, maybe that 10-year range. I'd probably be looking at a 2008 to 2010 Speed Triple from Triumph. Or if I could find, I sold my VFR.
For a guy who didn't want to buy a bike, you really had this list.
I know.
Ready to
I've been thinking about. I would like to get a Superhawk, an old Honda Superhawk again.
There's a really nice one on Craigslist by us.
I know.
It's like $1,200 bucks.
I've been looking at Craigslist on Superhawk.
Now you just blew it. Someone's gonna go buy it right now, right from.
Don't do it.
Well, no,
don't do it.
By the time they're watching this, it'll
be
be
a pre-recorded
long
episode.
sold.
So yeah, I might buy something. In
As
2020,
always,
but it would be
for
used.
me, I just would always buy something older that I could mess with and work on. I just love working on stuff in the wintertime. Here around Philadelphia, wintertime for me is bike build season, because if it's too crappy out to ride, I'm just as happy to shut the garage door, turn the stereo and the heater on, and just wrench away for a few months.
What about you?
Used. I'd buy a used bike. There we go. I'm way faster at that than you guys are.
But you don't have any examples of ones that you're thinking about?
Oh, there's a bundle of them. You never know what I'm going to fall in love with.
I know, that is true.
Every day it's a different bike. I think that does it, guys. We've said a lot of words about used bikes.
And new bikes.
Yeah, so you folks out there who now know exactly what you should purchase for 2020, you've gotten all the opinions you need.
We've angered those Honda Shadow buyers.
Right,
that are
so
just
buy
like,
a new bike, buy a used bike, don't buy anything
have.
at all. We're fine with
But
whatever.
just keep in mind that there is also the podcast component. So if you haven't gotten enough of us talking and yammering yet, just remember you can check out the podcast. We've got some really cool interviews with some notable figures in the motorcycle community, and we also have a whole section where we actually respond to the comments that you've left for us. So make sure you type in RevZilla to wherever you get your podcasts and leave some positive reviews for us as well. We love that.
Yes, please, and thank you.
This has been another episode of High Side, Low Side. That's Spurge. This is Joe. I'm Lem, and we're out of here.